The crunch of gravel beneath my tires was the only sound breaking the silence as I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. The old farmhouse in Timber Hollow stood just as it always had, whitewashed walls slightly chipped, a porch swing creaking in the breeze, and flower boxes filled with wilted geraniums clinging to summer's last breath. It looked familiar, even comforting in that nostalgic kind of way. But as I parked the car and stared at the house, something in me hesitated. I hadn't been home in almost 2 years. And this time I didn't come just to visit. I came to see if it could ever feel like home again. My name is Sienna Parker. And this is the story of the moment everything changed. I had flown in from a business retreat in Seattle, told my assistant to clear my schedule for 3 days, and loaded my 5-year-old daughter Ivy into the rental car from the Boston airport. The drive to Timber Hollow took 6 hours. 6 long hours of thinking, dreading, hoping, maybe foolishly, that things would be different this time. But as I stepped through the front door, the faint scent of lemon cleaner and lavender air freshener hit me like a wall of memory. It smelled exactly like it did when I was 11, silently wiping down counters while my mother raved about Clara's latest dance recital. Clara, my younger sister by 4 years, always the center of attention. Always golden. I called out a soft, hello, but no one answered. Ivy slipped her small hand into mine. Is Grandma gonna be nice? She whispered, eyes wide. I squeezed her hand. Let's just say hi first. The kitchen was where I found them. Ivy's tiny frame balanced on an old step stool at the sink, her arms barely reaching the water. She was scrubbing dishes, tall stacks of them, and her face was tense, eyes darting nervously toward my mother Margaret, who stood close, pointing out imagined spots on plates and muttering harsh criticisms. Come on, use your elbow grease. It's not that hard, my mother snapped. Ivy flinched. In the living room I caught a glimpse of my cousins, twins from Clara's side. They were draped across the couch, giggling at something on a tablet. One of them looked up, smirked, then whispered something that made the other snicker louder. Neither moved to help Ivy. No one even noticed me yet. I felt it all at once. The airlessness of that house, the weighted silence of expectations, the old, familiar sting behind my eyes. My little girl standing in my place. Just like I had once. I'd scrubbed those same dishes under that same glare, trying to earn a kindness that never came. I stepped forward slowly. Ivy. She looked up, startled. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, quiet, relieved ones. She dropped the sponge immediately and ran into my arms. What is this? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Oh, my mother said, turning at last. Her face was set in that familiar mask of false politeness. She offered to help. She's 5, I said. She said she wanted to. Don't be dramatic. I glanced at the dish pile. Looks like she's been wanting to help for a while. She was just playing house, my mother replied, voice cool. It builds character. You used to help me all the time. Ivy's head was buried in my coat. She was shaking. I wrapped my arms tighter around her. And how did that turn out for me, Mom? She looked away. Don't come in here with your attitude, Sienna. You're the one who decided to disappear for years. Now suddenly you're concerned. No apology. No flicker of guilt. Just that same dismissive edge. In the living room my cousins kept laughing. I wondered if they even understood what was happening. If they even cared. Ivy, go grab your things. We're leaving, I said softly into her ear. Her head shot up. Really? Yes, sweetheart. My mother scoffed. Oh, stop being dramatic. You just got here. I turned to her. You don't get to discipline my child like that. You don't get to recreate the nightmare I lived and expect me to smile through it. What nightmare? She said sharply. You had a roof over your head. You had everything you needed. No, I said. I had everything you decided I needed. But not what I deserved. She opened her mouth, but I was already walking out the door, Ivy's hand in mine. As I buckled her into the back seat, I realized something inside me had finally snapped. Not in anger but in clarity. This wasn't just about today. This was about a lifetime. About a little girl named Sienna who'd been told she was too sensitive, too selfish, too emotional, and now stood watching history repeat itself in the eyes of her daughter. Ivy's small voice cut through my thoughts. Mom, do we really have to go back tomorrow? I looked at her through the mirror. No, baby. We don't have to go back at all. And just like that I knew, I wasn't just driving away from my parents' house. I was driving toward something better. For both of us. Toward freedom. Toward healing. Toward the truth. The morning after we left Timber Hollow, I stared at my phone for a long time. The sun was barely up, casting golden lines across the hotel bed where Ivy still slept, curled beside me like she had when she was a toddler. Her thumb was tucked near her chin and one leg poked out from beneath the blanket. She looked peaceful, safe. I hadn't seen her sleep like that in months. I opened my banking app, then my email. The familiar weight of guilt pressed on my chest as I stared at the autodraft set for the 15th. $1,836.82, like clockwork, sent every month to cover the mortgage on my parents' house. Their house. It had been like this since 2019 when my dad lost his job after the paper mill closed, and Claire's husband got laid off in the same year. I had been making more money than I ever expected to in my career, consulting work for firms in Boston and tech startups out west, so I offered. No one begged me. But no one thanked me either. It had started as a safety net. Then it became expected. Eventually they just stopped mentioning it altogether. I scrolled past the draft, thumb hovering. For a moment I considered letting it go one more time. But then I remembered Ivy's face in that kitchen. The tremble in her lip. The way her little shoulders hunched as if she could somehow make herself invisible. Oh, not again. I picked up the phone and called my financial advisor. I want to stop the mortgage payments, I told her. Effective immediately. She hesitated. Are you sure? You've been doing this a long time. I'm sure. I could hear her typing. All right. Just know if your parents don't make the payment within the next 30 days, it'll enter default. I understand, I said. But it wasn't just about money. Not anymore. Later that afternoon I called my lawyer Lauren, an old college friend who'd seen me through my divorce and the custody battle that followed. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I want to begin the foreclosure process. They won't be able to pay the mortgage on their own. Not unless they get real jobs, which I doubt. Lauren was quiet. Sienna, this is big. Are you ready for what's coming? No, I said honestly. But I can't keep enabling people who hurt me, and who are now hurting my daughter. She nodded. Then I'll get the paperwork started. That night, as Ivy and I shared pancakes at a roadside diner, the weight that had clung to my chest began to lift. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for permission. I wasn't bracing for the next guilt trip or phone call demanding I fix something. I was choosing us. Me and Ivy. Her wide eyes sparkled over a plate of chocolate chip pancakes. She looked up at me, syrup on her chin, and whispered, "Are we really not going back?" "We're starting somewhere new," I said. "Good," she replied, simple as that. Word traveled fast in Timber Hollow. 3 days later my cousin Hannah called. "Did you really stop paying the mortgage?" I didn't bother lying. "Yes." There was a long pause. "Why would you do that to Aunt Margaret?" "She's your mom. She's Ivy's grandmother, and she let her wash dishes like a maid while everyone else sat on their phones." "She's old school," Hannah replied. "You know how she is." "She's cruel," I said. "And I'm done pretending that's okay." Within hours my phone exploded with messages. Clara left a voice memo, her usual sweet but slightly condescending tone. "Sienna, I'm sure this is just a miscommunication. I'm coming down next weekend, maybe we can talk through it in person." She didn't even ask how Ivy was. My dad texted me for the first time in months. "Can't believe you'd turn your back on your family like this. Thought you were better than that." I stared at the screen, then set the phone down. The next day they called Lauren directly, trying to argue that the foreclosure was a mistake. She handled them with the kind of cool grace I'd always wished I had when talking to my mother. "Your daughter no longer wishes to subsidize your home," she said. "There's nothing illegal about it. And unless you can make the full payment, the house will be reclaimed by the lender." They were stunned. They'd assumed I was bluffing. 2 weeks later I received an email from the bank. Foreclosure proceedings had begun. The official notice would be sent by certified mail. I forwarded it to Lauren, then sat on the porch of our temporary rental and watched Ivy play in the yard with a handful of dandelions. He was laughing. Freely. No scolding. No weight of expectation. The house in Timber Hollow, once the centerpiece of my guilt, was now slipping out of our lives like a bad dream you forget by morning. So I braced myself. I knew the worst was yet to come, when the family stopped whispering and started screaming. When the community caught wind of the Parker daughter who abandoned her parents. When Clara flew in and tried to take control of the narrative. But I also knew something else now. Something deeper. You can love your family and still walk away from them. You can care about people and still protect yourself from them. Especially when you're a mother. Especially when your child is watching. And Ivy was watching. Every step I took. Every decision I made. And I wanted her to see what it looks like when a woman stands up. Not just for herself but for her future. For her daughter. I didn't expect the calls to come so fast or so ferociously. It started with Aunt Caroline, the unofficial, emotional representative of the family. Her voice trembled with the urgency of someone used to maintaining appearances. "Sienna," she said, "I heard what's happening. Honey, this isn't you." I held the phone to my ear, standing barefoot in the kitchen of our new rental house. Ivy was in the next room, carefully gluing tiny seashells to a paper lantern, her latest creative obsession. I didn't want her to hear any of this. "It is me," I said quietly. "This is exactly who I am now." "You're breaking your parents' hearts," Caroline whispered, as if heartbreak were a fragile thing I had cracked open carelessly. "Margaret is beside herself." I almost laughed. She wasn't beside herself when she was criticizing a 5-year-old over water spots on dishes. "Sienna, she didn't mean it like that. She's old-fashioned." "She was cruel," I cut in. "There's a difference." Caroline sighed as if tired of trying to convince me. "Well, people are talking, sweetie. You know how small towns are. This whole foreclosure thing, it's ugly. For all of us." That's when I realized it wasn't about Ivy. It wasn't even about me. It was about them. Their embarrassment. Their fragile community image. Their perfect holiday photos and Sunday brunches with matching napkins. And I was tearing through it with a truth they didn't want to see. "I'm not responsible for what people say, Caroline," I said. "But I am responsible for Ivy. And I won't apologize for protecting her." I hung up before she could respond. Clara flew in the next day. She didn't call ahead. Just showed up at the rental house in her perfectly pressed white blouse, oversized sunglasses perched on her head like some magazine mom. I saw her through the window before she rang the bell. She always knew how to arrive like a scene from a movie, poised, rehearsed, and just dramatic enough to earn sympathy. Ivy answered the door. "Aunt Clara." Clara crouched, arms open. "There's my little love bug. I missed you so much." Ivy hesitated before hugging her. I watched closely. That small pause was everything. Told me Ivy remembered. Maybe not the words, but the feeling of being overlooked, of being made small. I stepped forward. "Clara." She stood, smoothing her blouse like we were meeting for lunch, not a reckoning. "Can we talk?" We sat on the porch. Ivy stayed inside, the door cracked just wide enough for her to peek through. I didn't stop her. Clara crossed her legs, exhaled. "Sienna, this has gone too far. You don't need to destroy our family to make a point." I stared at her. "You think I'm doing this for revenge? I think you're angry. And maybe rightfully so. But foreclosure? For God's sake, you're putting Mom and Dad out of their home." I clenched my jaw. "I didn't put them out. They put themselves out when they thought they could keep taking and never look back. When they treated my daughter like she was beneath them. When they acted like my success made me their personal safety net." Clara shook her head, her voice dropping. "You've always been dramatic." There was that word again. Used on me since I was a teenager, like it could invalidate everything I felt. I took a breath, calming the tremble that started in my hands. "I paid their mortgage for 5 years, I said slowly. "That's over $100,000, Clara. Do you know how many times they said thank you?" She didn't answer. "They didn't ask me to stop. They assumed I never would." Clara leaned forward. "Let me cover the next few payments. I can get it current." "No," I said. "You don't get to swoop in now to save the family image. This isn't about keeping the house. It's about accountability." She sat back, stunned. I continued, softer now. "You were the favorite. You always were. And I'm not blaming you for that. But you were there last week, Clara. You watched Ivy wash those dishes. You saw how Mom talked to her. And you didn't say a word." She opened her mouth. Closed it again. "I'm not asking for an apology," I said. "I'm asking for honesty." Clara looked away. She didn't fight me anymore. She left without a hug, without a tearful goodbye. Just a long, quiet stare. Maybe confusion, maybe understanding. The foreclosure moved forward. Official notices were posted. The auction date was set. The bank offered no extensions. My parents had no funds to stop it. They didn't qualify for any more refinancing. The truth was harsh but not unexpected. What did surprise me was the letter I received a week before the auction, and signed but with handwriting I recognized as my grandmother's. Inside were faded photographs, yellowed with age. One showed my mother at 16, crying in a corner while my great-grandmother pointed at her with the same rigid finger I'd seen countless times. On the back of the photo, we all learned the hard way. I held the photo in my lap for a long time. Not out of pity but perspective. My mother had once been a daughter too. Maybe even a scared one. But she chose not to break the cycle. She chose to perpetuate it. That was the difference. And I was choosing something else. The night before the auction, Ivy crawled into my lap. "What will happen to their house?" she asked. "It'll go to someone else," I said. "Someone who needs a house, maybe." She nodded. "Can we make our house different?" I kissed the top of her head. "We already are." And as the wind rustled outside and the clock ticked toward morning, I knew we weren't burning bridges. We were building a road forward. One paved with truth. One Ivy would never have to be afraid to walk. The house on Birch Hill Lane was smaller than I imagined our new start would be. No grand porch, no white picket fence. Just a modest craftsman-style home with creaky floors and windows that stuck if you tried to open them too quickly. But there was a little garden patch in the back, and Ivy had claimed it as her own the day we moved in. It wasn't much, but it was ours. And more than anything, it was safe. The foreclosure went through 2 weeks after the auction. A real estate investor out of Montpelier bought the Timber Hollow house. I didn't even attend the auction. I'd already said goodbye. There was no ceremony in how it ended. No dramatic final moments. The house that held decades of secrets and silent battles passed to someone who didn't care about its ghosts. My parents moved into a cramped second-floor apartment in an older part of town. I didn't hear much about it directly, just whispers through my cousins or a passive-aggressive Facebook post from Aunt Caroline about the consequences of pride. My parents never called me. Clara tried once, but it wasn't to check on Ivy or ask how we were doing. It was to tell me how hard this all was on Mom. How she cried every day walking through the aisles of the local grocery store, people pretending not to stare. But I couldn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. Because now I woke up each morning to the sound of Ivy humming to herself as she got dressed, not worrying whether she'd be scolded for choosing the wrong socks. I made coffee in a quiet kitchen, no tension simmering just beneath the surface. And for the first time in my adult life, I breathed without bracing for impact. One night, I found Ivy sitting on the living room floor with an old photo album. She had pulled it from a box I hadn't opened yet, one that still smelled faintly like Timber Hollow. The album was filled with pictures from my childhood. Christmas mornings where Clara beamed in the center of the frame and I stood off to the side, half cropped out. Birthdays where Ivy's little face now mirrored my own, watching someone else blow out the candles. "Who's this?" Ivy asked, pointing to a picture of me at 12, smiling awkwardly beside my mom. "That's me," I said. "And that's Grandma." She stared for a while. Then slowly she peeled the photo out and placed it on the table. "I don't like how you look in this one," she said. "You look like you're pretending." Tears stung my eyes, but I nodded. I was. Then she did something that nearly broke me. She folded the photo in half and slipped it into the recycling bin. "No drama. Just quiet resolve. I only want pictures of when you're happy," she said. In the months that followed, life began to unfold in small, beautiful ways. I enrolled Ivy in a new school that emphasized kindness, mindfulness, and creativity. Her teacher sent me notes about how bright and empathetic she was, words I'd never heard directed at me as a child. I started volunteering on weekends at a local women's center, and from that an idea grew, one that took shape slowly like a seed beneath the snow. I created a small foundation called Rise Before Rain, a tribute to the children who, like me and Ivy, were asked to carry the emotional burdens of the adults around them. We started with therapy grants and one-on-one mentorships. No big campaigns. No fundraising galas. Just quiet, tangible help. Some nights I'd stay up late reading letters from single mothers trying to shield their kids from the same generational wounds. I knew their stories. I was their stories. And finally, I had something to offer besides silence. The letters from my parents came occasionally, usually around holidays. The first Christmas, they sent Ivy a box of presents and a card addressed only to her. Inside a note, "We miss you every day. Love, Grandma and Grandpa." There was no mention of me. No acknowledgement of what happened. Just a carefully constructed narrative, one that erased the pain in favor of sweet-sounding regret. Ivy opened the box and inspected the toys, then looked at me. "Do I have to send them something back?" "No, baby," I said. "You don't owe anyone anything." She paused. "What if they ask me why I don't come visit?" "You tell them the truth," I said. "That you're safe now. And that's what matters." The truth was, I didn't hate them. Not even close. Some days I mourned them more than I missed them. I mourned the version of my mother who might have held me when I cried instead of telling me to toughen up. The father who could have stood up for me instead of retreating into the background. The sister who could have seen me not as a threat, but as someone worth standing beside. But I didn't need their love to be whole anymore. I had Ivy. I had a new sense of peace. And I had the knowledge that I had chosen something better, even if it meant being the villain in their story. One spring afternoon, Ivy and I drove past Timber Hollow. The new owner had renovated the place. Fresh paint, new roof, a flower garden blooming where the old rusted swing used to sit. Ivy looked out the window, curious. "Will we ever go back there?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. We already have what we needed from that place." She thought for a moment, then nodded. "Okay." We didn't look back again. Because home, we had finally learned, wasn't a place you came from. It was the one you choose, every single day, with love, with courage, and with the promise that the past will never define your future.